Now, just to connect it all for you, we have a very special treat. It is my privilege, as ever, to introduce the great David Center. Speaking of shoulders we stand on, the man behind the tractor case from the American agriculture movement is here to introduce a friend of his who also just brought a tractor up here to Saratoga Springs.
Thank you very much. I thank you, Larry, so much for setting the stage. I guess being a bit of a hellraiser, troublemaker, beginning in the 70s, and driving my tractor 1,495 miles from Texas to D.C. in 1979. These pictures brought back such memories, but I am very honored to introduce William DellaCamera. He's a Connecticut farmer, and I saw an NBC News story in D.C. about this Connecticut farmer that was madder than hell on his tractor heading to Washington, D.C. So ended up, and we made contact and talked on the phone, and every day he was texting me, showing me pictures and where he was at, stopping at farms. And 2 days ago, Will had his tractor sitting by the U.S. Capitol. And I said, Will, you gotta come to Farm Aid. Well, you just gotta do it. And he did. And his tractor is here outside. And so I'm gonna introduce Will, and then we're all gonna go out there so you get to see it, that one person can make a difference and inspire others. Will?
Yeah. Very good. How do you start?
Okay, so what led up to my story was on 8/26, just a few weeks ago, we had a tremendous hailstorm that lasted 13 minutes. In that 13 minutes, I lost all 125 acres of my vegetables. And if you could see the pictures of them, you would realize, wow, that's destructive. It cut through peppers. At 8 o'clock at night, there was still ice in the bottom of those peppers. So, as with anybody, I was shocked. I knew I was done. I knew my farm was finished for the year. So with that, I started to make the calls that any person would. I have FSA insurance. I have insurance through RMA. I wasn't getting the answers I wanted. Okay, and knowing that just a little over a year prior to that, on July 11th, all the farmers in the Connecticut River Valley lost their farms. And I watched as my friends struggled and reeled as how they were going to pay their bills. Some of them had insurance and some of them didn't. But what I got to see was lawmakers coming out to their farms, and when the cameras were rolling, they said, oh, we're going to help these farmers. We got what they need. So in turn, I hear everybody say, oh, they're all set. The government's going to take care of them. A low-interest loan doesn't take care of anybody. So fast forward to now, and I've done all I can do on my farm to make it weather resilient. I've spaced out rows. I've done cover cropping. I've worked with NRCS to put in waterways, grassed waterways, pollinator habitats, and everything. So with that, with what I was getting from the federal side and then the state side was I got a phone call And that's all I got. Later that day, I got an email that said I needed to self-report the acres I lost to the state so that the state could put in for a disaster declaration. Okay, that's Tuesday. I'm reeling, I'm mad. Tuesday morning, when I called FSA, they told me that it was going to be up to a week to get an adjuster there. You could imagine what words came out of my mouth. You could imagine what I said. So, in Connecticut, we don't even have an adjuster. I wasn't happy. My answer was that someone said that somebody didn't think it was a big enough deal. That got me even more mad. So, I said, if there's not someone out here by noontime, there's going to be an issue. At 11:53, someone pulled into my farm to at least take pictures. So I'm not sure what I said made them come out, but they did. Then Wednesday morning comes around, and I called someone from the Connecticut Department of Ag to tell them about my story. Somebody else said, you shouldn't go down to Southbury, Connecticut today. They're having a listening session for all the farmers that just lost all of their farms to 14 inches of rain in about 3 hours. They got washed right off you can't imagine the water damage down there. So I go down to that meeting, and I walk in, and I brought a whole bin of vegetables with me that were destroyed, and I put them down, and I stood there in the corner, and I waited till they all had their moment, because that meeting was for them. And someone said, I think we have a special guest here today that wants to talk. So I took the floor, and everybody else sat down. So I stood in front of them, and I said that if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything. But I'm going to sit down when I talk to you, because I got a lot to say, and I don't want to stand up. Went through the whole thing, referenced all the way back to 1999 when we had a drought declaration in Connecticut. And at the time, Dan Glickman came to our farm, and then he said, we have low interest loans. At that time, my Senator Richard Blumenthal was there, and I said to him, they didn't work in 99. They're not going to work 25 years later. And you've been at this for 12 years and you haven't fixed it. You didn't fix it from last year. What are we doing? And I went down the line and I professed my anger to every one of them. In the meantime, I said, I don't know why we're sitting in this air-conditioned room when we should be out on these farms. You should see their devastation, and you should be at my farm because it smells like a compost heap. So Mr. Blumenthal said to me, I'll come out to your farm. I said, okay, come out. So we made the appointment for Friday. Now, 2 days later, I know he's coming out to my farm. I go home Wednesday and watch the news. What do I see on the news? Farmers in Southbury are mad because they lost their farms, not only to water, but to hail. And then Mr. Blumenthal says, we're going to save these farms. We got low interest loans and grants. I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. Thursday mid-morning, I got on my social media, and I told all my friends, we're having Mr. Blumenthal over. Come on over. So he shows up at my farm, and you can go on YouTube when we leave here. You can take a picture of the farm name and put that in your phone, put hail with it, and watch the 39-minute video. And you'll see me calmly talking to Senator Blumenthal. So what happens, and people just talked about it here, after that meeting, all the news stations run the news. Northford farmer's angry, he lost all his vegetables to hail. Clips to Mr. Blumenthal. We're going to help him. During the first meeting and during that meeting, I said to him, And he referenced it in the video. He says, Will here said he would walk to Washington to testify if I needed him. And I said, on that Friday meeting, I said, well, I'm going to drive my tractor to Washington. And if you guys don't want me there, you'll arrest me. But if you want me there, I won't get arrested. And he said, you won't get arrested. And at that, I didn't see my mother, but I know what she did. She went, oh my God, this guy didn't say that. So I said, I'm going to change the oil in my tractor and I'm going to head off to Washington. And that's what I did. So now I got to get that out. So in that meeting too, so if you watch the video, one of the worst things about me losing my farm is not losing the vegetables and is not having anything else to sell. It's the 12 people that I employ that depended on me to give them as many hours as they could work for at least the next 3 or 4 weeks. So they had money to go through the winter, which now I don't have that ability to do, but they are working and I'm giving them as many hours as I can. So I've found other things to do so that I could keep them employed as long as I can, because if I let them go, what are they just going to burden the system? They're going to get evicted. They're going to have everything else happen to them that's not fair. And I don't need that. Those are my workers. They're like family to me. And I can't let them be in trouble because of this. So on 9/5 to 9/8, I set out in the eastern part of Connecticut from the river to Rhode Island, hit as many farms as I can. In those 3 days, I did 155 miles, and I stopped at every farm that I could stop at and talked about what was going on, and not one of those farmers had a story for me that was good. They've all been through these same problems with FSA and RMA. They don't get the insurance because it costs too much. They don't get the insurance because they don't understand it. So we're all in the same boat. So I go home on 9/9 because I had things to do. On 9/10 to 9/13, I set out in the western part of Connecticut from the river to the New York line. On 9/13, I drove to the capital. In that time, I did 175 miles, and I met with just as many or more farmers, and their stories are all written on the boards. You'll see them when we get out there. So on 9/13, and that was Friday and Saturday, I finished driving around Connecticut. I crossed the New York border at 4 o'clock. I drove all the way to Easton, Pennsylvania, 136 miles from where I started, and it wasn't purposely. And had I had a pillow and a blanket, I would have just slept in the trailer. But when I got to the New Jersey, Pennsylvania line, the hotel I was hoping to stay at was booked for a wedding. So I said, well, I'm going to drive to Easton. That was a long 75 miles. Let me tell you something. It was good though, because I saw so many things that I never would see in my life. I got to see most of these farms of my friends and people I didn't know. I've heard their names. I got to see their farms in action. It was the best couple weeks I had, to be honest with you. But I know I got to go back to my farm on Monday, and I know it's still shot, but so be it. From Easton, Pennsylvania, on 9/15 Sunday, I drove 78 miles to Lancaster. In driving those miles, I stopped at a place because it was Willie's ice cream and something or other. So I said, I'm going to stop here and take a picture of the sign because it's my name. I'm sitting down. These 3 people are trying to eat their ice cream, and they can't get the umbrella to get up. I said, come over here, sit with me. I'll tell you a story. They happened to be from a church. They happened to be, which was okay with me. I told him my story. So he starts to tear up. I said, what's wrong? He goes, well, my son and I put $1.2 million into our farm 5 years ago, and we lost it all the next year. So I said, well, I guess I'm going to keep going because this is another story. another story to add to the whole picture. So I get there, I go through all of that. I get to Lancaster, to my friend's house that I went to college with. He had called me when I started this, and I thought he called me to tell me I was crazy and laugh at me, but he said, you have to do this. So I ended up at his house. We had a little gathering there. The Lancaster farmer came. They documented the whole thing. They wrote a nice article. That was on Monday, 9/15. Or was that? That was on Monday, 9/16, that we had that meeting. On 9/17, I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I left Lancaster at 4 a.m. I had 105 miles to go. That's when I started to get calls. Well, I got David's call, 9:12 maybe, and he encouraged me to keep it up, so I did. On my way to Washington that morning, I started getting calls. They know I'm coming, right? So I don't know what's going on.
I got called.
This crazy guy's coming. So I get into DC at like 9:45. They tell me to pull right up underneath the flyover from one USDA building to the other, that they're going to have a parking spot for me. I can only stay there 2 hours, because if you stay there longer than that, someone's going to get mad. Your tractor might be this, your tractor might be that. I got out, and the best USDA guy, they have cops here. He said, you can stay here all day. I don't care. I'm going to sit here and watch your tractor. And with that, I met Scott Marlowe, which people must know here, and 3 other USDA individuals. We go across the street. We go right in the building. We start talking about all the problems, and they're not new problems. They're just problems that have not been fixed, that need to be fixed. They understand it. They know they got to be fixed, but we all got to do this together. Yeah. And one of the biggest things of doing this was that they always write new legislation and never fix the problems. So why not fix the problems that we already have before we make something new that's not going to work? That was my point to Blumenthal 3 times already, but apparently we don't think the same, okay? So we spend an hour and a half or 2 hours at USDA. We have lunch. We get a car right up the street to go to my representative, Rosa Delora's office, which she's always been above and beyond for anything I've asked her to do. Anytime I've had a problem, she's always found a way to fix it. So we go in there, myself, my father, the rest of my family. We have a meeting so she can get up to date on what's going on. Scott Marlowe was there. 2 other representatives from USDA were there. We talked about it. She said to me then, we're going to meet here again tomorrow. It's going to be myself and the whole rest of the Connecticut delegation, which I wasn't expecting, but they put it together. Just as she said that, one of the aides walked in the office and said, I got good news. Capitol Police said we could park the tractor there for an hour and we could get, okay, that's fine. So we go back, that meeting's over, we go home, and just get up the next morning, drive back. As I'm pulling in, Capitol Police surround me with their motorcycle cops, and they bring me right to where it is. I get out of the tractor, I say to the guy, I got about an hour here. He says, you could stay here all day, I don't care. We're going to sit here and watch it. I said, okay, it's fine. So that's how it went. We went in the office. All of them came in. Some of them know that there's problems, and they understand it. And I just reiterated what happened last year on the river. And I might have used some choice words because they left all my friends in the same place that I am right now last year. A low interest loan. It doesn't work. My friend down the river has $1.2 million in USDA low interest loans. He pays $65,000 a year in interest. And he's got to do that for the next 30 years. So what are we doing? So now I got in. I made the push. And we were walking out of the office. I said, wait, right now, before we leave here, I'm going to tell you one thing. If I don't get satisfaction, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. So they know that. And this is it. I have to keep doing this because it's not, at this point, it's for everybody. And we need this change. And they have to do it. They got to do it. If you look on one of those boards out there, it says, no politician could say no to a farmer. And I just have to say this story because this was unbelievable. When I asked the kid, I said, you have a wife? Because he had a ring on. He said, yeah, I have a wife. I said, you got any kids? He said, no, I don't have any kids. I said, you gonna have kids? He said, nope. When my wife and I got married, we had the farm. And in our vows, we vowed that we weren't gonna have children, that we were gonna take care of our nieces and nephews as our children, because we didn't think we can make ends meet with the farm and have our own children. Now that shouldn't be the case at all. And one other one on there is a direct neighbor of mine that I grew up with them my whole life. Young kids in 7th grade, he writes on that board, thanks for fight for my future. And he's a 5th generation dairy farmer. He's in 7th grade. He's got no idea how bad it is. He could hear, yes, he hears his father and his uncle and his grandfather complain all the time. But he's got no idea that farm's not going to be there for him. And it's just sad that has to be the way it is, the backbone of America, and that's where we're at. So anyways, I'm not going to ramble on anymore. I'm going to give this microphone back to Dave and let it hit.
Yeah. This is where I listen. We got that. You got one more thing.
All right. And just so everyone knows, I got a text message from Jennifer Fahey that said David's name in it. Do you know who he is? I said, I know who he is. You don't think I know who he is? That's the Tractorcade man.
And he wasn't born till 1980, and I said, how in the hell do you know I drove a tractor to Washington? He said, I just got my ways of knowing things.
I was born a year and 2 days after they did it.
Should we go outside and take a look at this tractor? Thank you, everyone. Let's head outside and take a look at this tractor.
Okay. So, well, you never.